Gas prices just ticked higher again, and this time the reason runs deeper than another missile exchange. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has fired 3 senior Army generals in the middle of active combat operations against Iran. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George was told to retire immediately. At the same time, General David Hodney, head of the Army's Transformation and Training Command, and the Army's Chief of Chaplains were also removed. This happened Thursday, as elements of the 82nd Airborne Division prepare to deploy to the Middle East, and the Army remains responsible for critical air and missile defense integration in theater. Here's what you need to understand. These are not routine personnel moves. They come while U.S. forces are engaged in a shooting war, with real losses already reported, including a downed F-15E and a missing airman. Most people are missing this. Firing the Army's top uniformed officer and the general tasked with speeding up new technology adoption, right now, sends a signal that ripples far beyond the Pentagon. It raises immediate questions about command stability, readiness, and the pace of adaptation in a conflict that is already testing supply lines and technological edges. What happened today could reshape how the Army fights this war, and how quickly it can respond to Iran's next move. But this is where it gets serious. The real story isn't just who was removed, it's what this sudden leadership vacuum means for the battlefield, for decision speed, and for the economic pressure already building back home. This purge didn't appear out of nowhere. Over the past several weeks, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has steadily replaced senior flag officers across the Joint Chiefs, intelligence agencies, and key combatant commands. General Randy George's removal marks the most visible strike yet at the very top of the Army. George had been pushing the Army Transformation Initiative, a major effort to accelerate adoption of new weapons, drones, and command systems. General David Hodney was handpicked late last year to run the newly created Transformation and Training Command, designed to turn those ideas into deployable capabilities fast. Both men were removed not over policy disagreements about the war's direction, according to officials close to the process, but over clashing personalities and perceived resistance to the pace of change Hegseth demands. Right now, this matters because the timing couldn't be more delicate. Units from the 82nd Airborne are already loading equipment for Middle East deployment. The Army is coordinating integrated air and missile defenses, protecting U.S. bases and partners from Iranian drones and ballistic missiles. The firings create an immediate leadership gap at the exact moment when rapid coordination between services, rapid tech integration, and on-the-ground execution are most critical. What led to this moment is clear. Hegseth is enforcing a much more aggressive timeline for military reform, even if it means breaking institutional norms during active combat. And this is where things shift. A 4-star general actively working to move troops and protective systems into theater was removed mid-operation. That single decision has now injected uncertainty into the chain of command at a time when hesitation can cost lives and momentum. The pattern is becoming hard to ignore. What exactly happened is now coming into sharper focus. On Thursday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth informed Army Chief of Staff General Randy George that he would retire immediately. In the same wave of decisions, Hegseth removed General David Hodney, the 4-star officer recently placed in command of the Army's Transformation and Training Command, and Major General William Green, Jr., the Army's Chief of Chaplains. The moves were abrupt. Senior military leaders described being blindsided. One official called firing a top general during active combat insane. Another questioned the wisdom of removing a leader who is directly overseeing the flow of equipment and personnel into theater to protect U.S. forces. Step by step, the sequence reveals friction over pace and control. George had been driving the Army's push for faster integration of cheap drones, autonomous systems, and new tactics, lessons drawn from ongoing conflicts. Hodney's command existed specifically to accelerate that shift from concept to battlefield reality. Hegseth, however, appears unwilling to tolerate any perceived drag. The official line points to personality clashes rather than outright policy fights, yet the timing tells a clearer story. These generals were seen as insufficiently aligned with the speed and direction the Secretary demands right now. But this is where the story changes. A 4-star general actively coordinating air and missile defense integration and 82nd Airborne movements into the Middle East was sidelined mid-operation. That creates an immediate handoff risk in a war already stretching logistics across the region. Uncertainty now sits at the center. Who steps into these roles? How quickly can new leaders absorb the current operational picture? And will the drive for rapid modernization slow down precisely when Iranian responses are testing U.S. and allied defenses? The chain of command has been reshaped again, this time while troops are moving and missiles are flying. This leadership shakeup is not simply internal Pentagon housekeeping. It carries direct strategic weight in the ongoing conflict with Iran. The Army currently shoulders two critical responsibilities in the Middle East theater: rapid deployment of ground forces, including elements of the elite 82nd Airborne, and coordination of integrated air and missile defense networks protecting U.S. bases, partners, and supply routes. Removing the Army Chief of Staff and the general responsible for transforming how the service adopts new technology creates friction exactly where speed and seamless execution matter most. In modern warfare against Iran's mix of drones, ballistic missiles, and proxy forces, delays in command transitions can translate into slower adaptation on the battlefield. Globally, this signals something larger. Hegseth is clearly prioritizing a leaner, faster, more politically aligned military structure over institutional continuity. The pattern shows repeated removals of senior officers across services and commands, reshaping the Joint Chiefs and combatant leadership in months rather than years. Structurally, the U.S. military's advantage has long rested on superior integration of technology, intelligence, and joint operations. Accelerating that edge is vital when facing an adversary that relies on asymmetric tools and regional alliances to offset conventional weaknesses. Yet the risk is equally clear. Institutional knowledge and operational momentum can erode when senior leaders change hands during active fighting. What changed today is the willingness to accept that short-term disruption in exchange for long-term control and doctrinal speed. Here's what you need to understand. This is no longer just about personalities. It's a deliberate bet that a reshaped command structure will deliver faster decision cycles and better integration of emerging systems before Iran can exploit any perceived hesitation. The global balance in this conflict just tilted toward higher stakes internal reform, with real consequences for how the war evolves in the coming weeks. What's really driving these firings goes beyond surface-level clashes. Pete Hegseth is operating on a compressed timeline. He sees the current war with Iran as both a threat and a rare window to force long-overdue modernization across the Army. The removed generals, while competent, represented layers of institutional caution that he believes slow the shift toward cheaper, more numerous autonomous systems, rapid drone integration, and decentralized command. The deeper motive is control over the velocity of change. Hegseth wants transformation that matches the tempo of the battlefield, not the traditional multi-year procurement and training cycles. By removing George and Hodney, he is clearing space for officers who will execute that vision without pushback, even if it means accepting temporary friction in the middle of combat operations. This reflects a calculated trade-off: short-term command instability in exchange for eliminating perceived bureaucratic resistance. The Army's transformation initiative, which both fired generals helped shape, is now likely to be accelerated or redirected under new leadership more closely aligned with the Secretary's priorities. Most people are missing this layer. The firings are not random purges. They are part of a broader effort to align the senior ranks with a more aggressive, results-oriented approach to great power competition, using the current Iran conflict as the proving ground. What this means is that decisions in the coming months will likely favor speed over consensus. New commanders may greenlight experimental tactics or faster fielding of systems that previous leadership might have studied longer. The hidden risk lies in execution. In a live war where Iranian forces and proxies continue to probe defenses, any gap in institutional memory or delayed coordination between services can create openings. Hegseth is betting that the upside of faster adaptation outweighs that danger. Right now, this signals a military that is being deliberately remade under pressure, testing whether bold leadership changes can deliver battlefield results before the economic and strategic costs mount. But the other side tells a different story. Senior defense officials and career military leaders view these firings as deeply destabilizing. They argue that removing the Army Chief of Staff and a key transformation general during active combat operations risks exactly the kind of hesitation and confusion that adversaries hope to exploit. One official described the move bluntly as insane, pointing out that General George was personally overseeing the movement of troops and protective systems into theater to shield U.S. forces from Iranian threats. Critics inside the building see this as a dangerous precedent, prioritizing political alignment and personal loyalty over proven operational competence and continuity. They worry that repeated high-level ousters are eroding trust within the ranks and slowing, rather than speeding, the very modernization Hegseth claims to champion. When experienced four-star officers are sidelined mid-deployment planning, institutional knowledge walks out the door with them. From the diplomatic angle, this internal turbulence sends a mixed signal to allies and adversaries alike. Partners in the region watching U.S. force posture may question the steadiness of American command at a moment when coordinated deterrence is essential. Iran, meanwhile, may interpret the leadership churn as weakness or distraction, an opening to intensify proxy attacks or missile strikes while the Pentagon sorts out its new chain of command. The counter-narrative is clear. Hegseth may be forcing necessary reform, but the timing and method risk miscalculation. In a conflict already stretching resources, abrupt personnel shocks could create the very friction that turns tactical setbacks into strategic problems. What happens next will test which view prevails: rapid, decisive transformation, or costly instability at the top. This leadership upheaval is no longer confined to the Pentagon. It is already beginning to touch your daily life through higher costs and growing uncertainty. The Iran conflict continues to disrupt oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz and key shipping routes. Every day of prolonged fighting keeps tanker traffic cautious and insurance rates elevated. With the U.S. Army now facing internal command friction at a critical moment, any delay in stabilizing operations risks extending the timeline of instability in the Middle East. That translates directly into your wallet. Gas prices have already edged higher in recent weeks. Further disruption from delayed U.S. responses or escalated Iranian actions could push crude oil above $90–100 per barrel, adding 20 to 40 cents or more per gallon at the pump within weeks. Food costs will follow, as higher diesel prices raise transportation expenses for everything from groceries to farm supplies. Jobs are also at risk. Industries tied to global energy and shipping, refining, logistics, manufacturing, and retail face margin pressure that often leads to slower hiring or outright cuts. Inflation, which many households hoped was easing, could regain momentum if energy shocks ripple through the broader economy. What this means for you is simple but serious. Prolonged uncertainty in the Middle East now carries a higher domestic price tag because the U.S. military's command structure is in flux precisely when steady execution matters most. Most people are missing how quickly these distant firings can compound into higher monthly bills. If the new leadership takes time to get fully operational, the resulting hesitation could keep energy markets volatile longer than expected, hitting family budgets, retirement savings, and business confidence at home. Right now, this signals that geopolitical decisions made in Washington are accelerating their impact on everyday economics faster than many realize. What happens next will determine whether this bold reset strengthens the U.S. position or creates exploitable gaps. In the short term, expect a rapid handoff. New acting leaders will likely be installed within days, with Hegseth pushing them to accelerate drone integration, autonomous systems testing, and tighter joint coordination in theater. The 82nd Airborne deployment will continue, but with heightened scrutiny on execution speed and any early friction in air and missile defense synchronization. Midterm, two scenarios emerge. If the new command team delivers faster adaptation, quicker fielding of counter-drone measures, and more agile logistics, the U.S. could regain momentum, forcing Iran to recalibrate its proxy and missile campaigns. This path favors de-escalation pressure through demonstrated strength. However, if the transition creates even brief hesitation or coordination lapses, Iran and its partners may test the seams aggressively: more frequent drone swarms, attempted strait disruptions, or heightened attacks on regional bases. That risks a cycle of retaliation that keeps energy markets volatile for months. The deeper prediction: Hegseth's approach signals a permanent shift toward faster, less consensus-driven military leadership. This conflict is becoming the test case for whether the U.S. can modernize under fire without losing operational edge. Here's what you need to understand. The real stakes go beyond one war. Markets will watch every new appointment and early battlefield signal closely. Any sign of delayed adaptation could keep oil and inflation expectations elevated well into the year. The situation remains fluid. Command stability is now a variable in the conflict equation, and the coming weeks will reveal whether this purge delivers the decisive edge Hegseth intends, or hands adversaries an opening they won't ignore. The next moves in this war will be shaped as much by who is now in the room as by what is happening on the ground. Thanks for watching. If you want deeper dives on how these shifts affect energy markets and your costs, drop your questions below. I'll break them down in the next video.